Hello and welcome back to another Horus Heresy painting tutorial. In this video I'll be showing you how you can paint your Salamanders in the colours of the pre-Heresy Legion, and as always I'll be using the Citadel range of paints to do so. So here we have the miniature that I'll be using in this tutorial, and as you can see I've already primed it using the Army Painter's Angel Green Spray Primer. Now if you don't have access to that, you could alternatively use Games Workshop's Caliban Green Spray. Make sure you spray it over a primer though. Alternatively, you can actually just brush paint Caliban Green onto the miniature instead. Now as you can see here, I've also kept the right bolter arm separate. Now this makes it a lot easier for painting the chest areas. Now the first step is to apply a glaze of Warpstone Glow on the miniature. Now if you saw my Sons of Horus painting tutorial, you're probably already aware of what a glaze is. It's essentially the layering of several thin paints, and this just creates a nice gradient that gives you some nice shading in the recesses. So I'll be mixing my Warpstone Glow here, roughly in 50-50 quantities, with some Lamium Medium. Now the Lamium Medium should create a nice mixture, as you can see here, quite fluid, a lot thinner than you would expect normally from a normal paint, and I'm going to be applying this on to the top of the helmet here. Now one of the things I would recommend is to apply 2 thin coats as opposed to just applying everything in one thick coat, and this will really help with the gradients. So all I'm doing is just picking out the upper sections such as the helmet here, as this is where the light would be hitting from above, and just leaving the recesses dark. Now the next step after applying the Warpstone Glow glaze across the armour is to highlight the very edges, and for this we'll be using Moot Groen. So for this step I'll be picking out the very edges of the armour, just very carefully using my brush here just to drag it along the edge, just applying a very thin line of Moot Groen. I'll be doing this on all of the upper edges such as the knee pads here, the leg joint at the top, and also the helmet, anywhere essentially where the light is hitting a top surface. Now the next step in painting the armour for the Salamander is to wash over the entirety of it with Waywatcher Green. Now the reason for applying this glaze is because it will blend in the layers that we applied in the last step, as well as applying a small amount of shading in the recesses without darkening the colour too much. I'm just being quite liberal here, just applying it over the entirety of the green areas on the armour. Now the next step in painting our Salamander is to paint all of the black areas. Now this includes the gaps between the armour plates, such as here on the leg, also the straps across the chest, the pipes on the backpack there as well. We've also got the main panels of the shoulder pads, and finally the weapon stock as well. I'm painting all of these areas with Abaddon Black. When painting these areas, just be very, very careful not to overspill, and I've mixed in a small amount of Lamium Medium here just to improve the coverage slightly, makes it a lot easier to cover. As you can see here, I'm just being very careful not to paint onto the green areas we painted in the previous steps. With the base layer applied to the black areas, the next step is to highlight it using Mechanicus Standard Grey. Now for this step we're just going to be picking out any of the raised sections, such as these pipes here. Just gently dragging the brush along just to create this nice grey highlight. And also on the shoulder pad as well, we're just going to be highlighting along the very edges. Now the next step is an optional one, and for this we'll be painting some flames onto both the leg down here and also the main plate just on the front there. And for the first step we'll be using Mephiston Red. So for the first step in painting the flames, we're going to be starting at the bottom, as the flames are emanating from around the foot there, and just drag the brush upwards just in a small squiggle like so, and you continue this into a point. I'm just going to be doing this all the way along the bottom there, and then we're going to be continuing this just on the plate there on the front of the armour as well. So with the red base down for the flames, the next step is to go over them again just to signify the hotter sections at the bottom, and for this we'll be using a Troll Slayer Orange. Now for this step we'll be painting the flames in much the same way as we did before, however we're going to be leaving the red sections visible at the top of the flames, just focusing mainly at the bottom here, just around the foot, like so. Now the final step for painting the flames is to just apply a very thin highlight around the bottom of the flames just there, and for this we'll be using Dawn Yellow. So as I've already said, we're just going to be finishing off the flame just by painting a very thin line of Dawn Yellow just at the bottom of the panel there, and also around the foot at the bottom as well. Now the next step is to paint all of the bronze areas, such as the chest panel there, and also the plating around the shoulder pads there, and also the studs just on this left leg. Now we're painting all of these areas with Balthasar Gold. Now when painting metallic areas over the top of non-metallic areas, you always want to be very, very careful not to spill onto the non-metallic areas. It's quite difficult to paint over again. Just going to be very careful here around the shoulder pad, just applying the Balthasar Gold. Now the next step in painting our Salamander is to wash over all of the bronze areas that we painted in the previous step with Seraphim Sepia. So for this step it's just a case of washing over all of the bronze areas that we painted in the previous step with the wash. And the reason why I'm using Seraphim Sepia as opposed to Agrax Earthshade is because it's not quite as dark, and we don't want to darken the bronze areas too much. Just being very careful here not to overspill onto the green areas. With the Seraphim Sepia wash dry, the next step is to highlight all of the bronze areas with Hashut Copper. Now for this step I'm just going to be using my thin brush here just to pick out the raised sections of the bronze just around the face mask here, and then also along the shoulder pads, anywhere that we've painted bronze, just going to be highlighting the very edges. Now the next step is to paint all of the silver metallic areas on the miniature, and for this we'll be using Leadbelcher. Now this includes the weapon, but also the vents just at the bottom there, and also the pipes leading to these top vents as well. I'm painting all of these areas with Leadbelcher. Now, as with the previous step, when painting the metal areas, you want to be very, very careful not to overspill onto the matte areas, such as the green, as you know it's quite difficult to paint over these areas once you've made a mistake. Just be very careful here, just to paint the entirety of these vents. With the base coat applied to the metal areas, the next step is to wash over them with Nuln Oil. Now washing over the metal areas with the Nuln Oil will create a nice amount of definition, especially in the recesses around here, just inside the vents. Just being careful to only apply it to the metal sections and not the green areas. This creates a nice darker layer ready for our highlight in the next step. Now the final step for painting the metal areas on this miniature are to highlight over them using Ironbreaker. As we've done so in the previous steps, I'm just going to be picking out the very edges here, just picking out the edges of these vents here. Just be careful not to overspill, just to create the nice highlight, like so. And here we have the completed miniature, and as you can see I've attached the flamer and also glued the miniature to a base. In addition to this, I've also painted the eyes on the miniature in exactly the same way as I tackled them on my Imperial Fist tutorial. Now if you enjoyed this tutorial and would like to see more, do let me know in the comments below. Additionally, subscribe to be kept up to date with all of my latest videos. If you would like to support me in making more tutorials, you can do so by heading over to my Patreon page, where you can donate from as little as $1 a month, and I'll pop a link in the description below there. Now until next time, thanks for watching, and goodbye.